al himno nacional de la República de Colombia.
The country rejects us. It means nothing to feel like a Colombian. In every field of activity, the black population is invisible. Here I feel foreign. I feel like a prisoner of war that the world has declared on Africa. Because our life here is an endless drama. The black man's life over here is always dramatic. The body is black, Holy is white. A writer and Cameroonian, I left to discover Black Colombia at the invitation of Juan de Dios Mosquera, whom I first met in Paris during the 150th anniversary of the second abolition of slavery. Bogota, Quibdó, Cali, and Guapi will be our stops during this journey. We're in Santa Fe de Bogota. Colombia's population is over 40 million, of which 30% are blacks, 45% if you include mulattoes.
Con las mallas de mi hamaca voy dejando todo el cansancio de mi diario traquinar, mezclado en la brisa del mar. Un canto negro viene a mí.
Juan de Dios Mosquera, winner of the 1998 Human Rights Prize in Paris.
El Premio de los Derechos Humanos de la República Francesa, otorgado al movimiento cimarrón,
the Human Rights Prize granted by the French government to the Cimarron movement helped awaken the Colombian society. The state and the political parties underestimated the importance of the Cimarron movement in the fight against racism within Colombia. That prize has legitimized the Cimarron movement and stigmatized discrimination against the black population in Colombia. The prize has boosted our connection with the media, with official institutions, and with communities in conveying our great concern about racism and the necessity to adopt concrete means, legal mechanisms, in order to eliminate it. How does the cultural exchange between Africa and Colombia concern those Colombians who are not black? Changing my Colombian name to an African one is unpopular within the population, particularly the black folks. The black people underestimate me and think I'm crazy for having done that because it's socially not accepted and not seen in a positive way to assume an African name. It's unpopular. To our minds, Africa is not appealing. It belongs neither to us nor to the Colombian society. The Colombian society doesn't integrate it in its social discourse. Africa is over there. It's a place of oldies, of ancestors, of forerunners, of great-grandmothers and fathers. Africa has been wiped out. We've got African practices, in cults, rituals, religion, food, but we don't know that all that comes from Africa. We don't know that all that comes from there. Some colleagues do mention the relationship between the Haitians of the Liberation War of Haiti, the kings over there, and Simon Bolivar in the fundraising for the war. But they do so only as something anecdotal and don't connect it with the black population here. They assume that Pétion and Louverture would have financed Bolivar with weapons and money in return for the promise of liberation of Africans down here. Bolivar was powerless. Even though he intended to keep his promise, he was alone. And the Haitians could hardly force the Colombian elite to deliver on his promise. He didn't have the power to fight them locally. The Colombian elite who held the power during colonial times, namely the Spanish Catholic Church, the political parties, the wealthy, and the political bureaucracy, still hold the power nowadays.
In 1978, I decided to call myself Biojo, in tribute to Bencos Biojo. My real name is Perea Martinez, but in memory of to Biojo, I decided to call myself Esperanza Biojo. I did it to honor our legendary hero, Bencos Biojo, who escaped slavery in 1713, along with his family and a bunch of African rebels, victims of slavery in Cartagena de Indias. They escaped southwards and launched a whole libertarian movement because African hostages and their offspring in America have always fought for their freedom. They initiated movements, confrontations that lifted Biojo to the rank of King of Palenque, Palenques of that period or time, right here in New Granada Kingdom. We've got a great funerary culture, 90% of which is African influence. For instance, the ritual of San Basilio de Palenque. The funerary ritual we call Lambalou. We've got a great funerary culture, 90% of which is of African influence. For instance, the ritual of San Basilio de Palenque, the funerary ritual we call Lumbalou.
The saga of the first Palenquero of San Basilio on the Atlantic coast fuels contemporary mythology. For instance, there's Kid Pambele, Black Colombian and first winner of the World Boxing Championship in 1974. I want to tell the story of the great Antonio Cervantes. I'm going to tell you what I know about the black man Pambele, the great fighter. The light of his faith blazed through San Basilio de Palenque from childhood. Pambele followed his calling. What courage this black man had with his iron fists, solid as a rock. I saw him the day he fought Nicolino and made Nicolino explode like a papaya. His left never betrays him, his right never falters. The black asses I paint are shaped like boxing gloves.
Libros y me encontré con la leyenda esta Bantú.
I was once reading a book, and I came across this Bantu legend, and that inspired me to paint my first big-ass picture. I worked on this picture until I found the ideal size.
Los dos colores amarillo y rojo.
Yellow and red represent fire, the fire that comes from those two colors. The blue in the middle keeps yellow and red from uniting. It's a mix between the violence that's destroying the country and the passive way in which the Colombians are reacting. I don't understand how so many killings can happen, so many slaughters of human beings, of friends, every day. And nobody does anything. We've gotten used to living in such violence. Extracts from an article by the writer Manuel Zapata Olivella in a Colombian magazine. For the viewer, an Aguas Limpias painting inspires first meditation, then reflection, and then in a great silence that idealizes the word, there is a voice inside that cheers loudly. It is a fabulous, unique painting that conveys a beautiful sensation of being next to one exuberant bottom, full of sun, caressing a dress of the tropics.
Yo he estado muy preocupado por mis
I've been very interested in my ancestors.
africanos,
African,
españoles y
Spanish,
amerindios.
and Amerindian.
Y he abordado siempre esta temática
I approached this subject
perspectivas,
from two perspectives.
como antropólogo,
As
médico,
anthropologist and medical doctor on the
y
one hand,
como escritor,
and as writer
con ensayos,
on the other,
con novelas, con
with
cuentos
essays,
y con dramas.
novels, and dramas.
Esta visión a partir de mi propia
This interest in my multi-ethnic background has been a constant in my books.
ha sido constante a lo largo de todo mi libro.
I've been pointing out differences between Amerindian cultures to make it clear that where the African could mix with Amerindians, he did so. And that led to a tremendous exchange of cultural values. The Amerindians assimilated many of the African values, and the Africans integrated Amerindian cultural values. That's what happened on the Caribbean coast, but not on the Pacific coast. On the Pacific coast, I should emphasize that there was no port to receive slaves in great quantities. Those who arrived were closely guarded and had no way of creating a Palenquero language. They needed to recreate African values from memory, not because of communication with the constant arrival of new Africans, but because living in the forest, either working in mining factories or having fled, the unique source of rebuilding their values was the memory that they kept from Africa. One can assume, and anthropologists have studied this phenomenon, that on the Pacific coast there is something like a new Africa. We're flying over the North Pacific coast. This is Quibdó, the capital of Choco. To all Africans, let them recognize Choco as representing pieces of the African puzzle with regard to certain cultural roots we inherited. The profile of Choco's population, it's one of the departments where the majority of the population is black. I want to recite a poem, Negro of Choco. Hot blood, elastic body, agile hands, friend of the sun, African extraction from fine ebony, spirit of a rebel, crystallized gold, heritage of the greats, Diego, Baruli, and Ndjehoya. The black rises up defying time in a forgotten corner of Choco, cradle of Palenque that marked our past, courageous maroon who fought for history. The Chocoano imagery has broken into 1,000 pieces in Colombia, in America, and in the Choco. My aim in researching is to reassemble those pieces of our collective imagination in order to complete the puzzle and to find explanations for our being on this continent. Another major project is titled Visions of Afro-Chocana Spirituality. Here, I try to reconstruct religious imagery with the help of special practices. One begins by speaking about religion and particular features of African beliefs. Then, one studies the black man's relationship with the forest and animals. It's a relationship driven by spirituality. We can't live without forest. They brought us to the forest. We went to the forest when we escaped from mining factories. And we remained in the forest when we were free at last. Here we'll remain.
Valles, ríos, montañas, costa en los dos mares, el canal, atrato, truando, la ensenada de Utría, y es que el mundo respira por nosotros porque somos su pulmón. Es Chocó, rico en flora, fauna, oro, platino y piel negra. Es un pueblito humilde que tiene sabor. Ven al Chocó, 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 ven al Chocó.
I've been working mainly on genealogies. I succeeded in tracing my family's genealogy to 1750. My grandmother told me that her grandmother, that is my great-great-grandmother, told her we came from a race brought from Africa called the Congos. They were known for their short size, their long lives, and their knowledge of witchcraft.
Yo conocí la tradición africana, hecha a través de películas.
I came to know Africa through movies made in America. But despite all their attempts to modify the color, I've seen my African people. I've seen my people. Blonde-haired Tarzan's monkey cheetah, jumping from vine to vine. If this Tarzan, made in America, was able to survive in Africa, it's something you could never understand or see in the same way I do. Africa was depicted as the land that could only produce slaves to be chained,
y los encadenaran y los volvieran. Pero ¿por qué?
If
Si
Tarzan survived there,
sobrevivió
it's because
en
that
ese
Africa was
ambiente
filled with
de
love, forests,
de selva
animals.
y animales. Tarzán fue un
Tarzan
hombre
was a
fuerte.
strong man in Africa.
Que decía berracamente, si
If
Tarzán fue
Tarzan
berraco en
was
África,
such a strong man in
hecho
Africa,
más de
why
ir
couldn't
África?
Africa continue to be that land,
África
where
no
love
podía
between man and animal was possible in the forest?
Está demostrando que África tenía
Those
amor,
films indicate that Africa was
tenía selva,
love, forest,
África tenía cariño,
tenderness,
África tenía
animals that could share their
animales
lives with the human.
que podían compartir su vida con el hombre.
This is a point of view North Americans did not consider, but I personally think it is that way.
No lo apreciaron
If
de
Africa had been racist, it would never have accepted
Si
Tarzan.
África hubiera sido reacia, no hubiera aceptado jamás. Si África hubiera sido racista, no hubiera aceptado jamás a Tarzán.
The master
Maestro
of
de la
Zanganeria
sanganería
is a
es un
special
tipo
kind of religious
especial
figure.
de religiosidad,
The word means initiator of spirituality.
de iniciadores de una religiosidad, y la palabra
The
zángano
word
profeta,
Zangano contains the
hace
morpheme
parte
ng, ing,
o
a
contiene
feature
el
of
morfema
Bantu
ing
languages.
propio de las lenguas bantúes. Palabras
Words such
como
as
tango,
tango,
chinango,
chinango.
y el zángano es un
The
depositario que maneja
Zangano is
información
the keeper
que maneja
of
un secreto
information
unido a
or
las plantas
secrets
y con ella puede
about
hacer el
plants
mal o el
with
bien.
which he can do
Los Congos
evil
se
or
consideran
good.
maestros de la
The Congos are the
sanganería.
masters of
Esta
Zanganeria, and this
Conga
Congo
es una
belief is
religiosidad
extremely
muy
secret.
secreta que se nutre y
It's
tiene
fueled
como
by
mayor
its
templo
church,
el monte,
the
la
mountain,
selva.
and the
Ahí
forest.
está todo el
Therein lies
conocimiento,
all the
está
knowledge,
todas las
all the
plantas
plants
que
that are
sirven
used for
para
all
todos
diseases and
los
all
males
good
y para
deeds.
todos los bienes. Entonces, los
The Congos are specialists in the use of plants and words. They're called Zanganos. On the Medio Atrato, there are 120 communities. Thanks to this collective property right, we succeeded in obtaining property titles on this land for a total of 45 inhabitants. For us, it was a great success as the beginning of collective property rights in Colombia. We're an example for the Pacific, and we can help the other 7,090 families sharing 800,000 hectares. In the past, there was no legislation for the black communities. It was the Nkora that made the law, with the mediation of wealthy people who could buy land. They would come and say, "It's mine." Or they would buy somebody's small piece and afterwards take the rest by force, saying, "There's your money, this is mine."
Mi amor, dígame que si arreglamos yo mando por ello. ¿A 1,000? Te voy a 4,000 por
They're exterminating peasants. How can people make their living?
No hay fuentes de empleo. No hay nada porque del campo es que se lleva toda la ciudad.
There's no job because they kick everybody out, force them to the city. People are forced to leave their villages, and there's nothing to eat in the city. In the village where I come from, most of the people have left. I resisted. Even when people ran away, I had to stay there. The person who wanted me to leave had to force me. As peasants, we need to work in peace. We are the people who live in the country, and we need tranquility to bring our produce to the city. I'm speaking of the rights of peasants and of the working class. That's the reality. Our reality. All that motivated us to organize ourselves in local committees. That's how Asia began, working in the Medio Atrato. Dealing with the problem of goods exported, that was the unique resource for the peasant wanting to make his living. If, for instance, my father has got no land, and so I've got no land, and then a woman comes along who falls in love with me and marries me, she and I keep on living on her land. This land, which she inherited from her father, will be her children's too, and as I am a member of the same family, it also belongs to me. Me, for instance, I do have lands in the Baudo. Over there, my father bought lands, and my mother owned lands near Ibaudo. Now, as I am here, my family says to me, you've got lands here.
Cocodrilo se encontraba en problema de una vez, con un hueso en su garganta, y ya no sabía qué hacer. Chica, le quedó la playa para su lamentación, pues pasó 4 semanas de penosa situación, pues pasó 4 semanas en penosa situación. Pero una garza vecina presurosa se acercó y condolida le dijo: cocodrilo, aquí estoy yo. Supe de tus sufrimientos y vengo a curar tu dolor. Te dejaré como nuevo, verás que tengo razón. Te dejaré como nuevo, verás que tengo razón. Ay, tan solo un favor te pido, que tú me dejes pescar por la ribera del río, sin temer que me hagas mal. Y llorando el cocodrilo dijo a la garza: ya está. Y llorando el cocodrilo dijo a la garza: ya está. Si me sacas de este apuro, esto y más te voy a dar. Si me sacas de este apuro, esto y más te voy a dar.
Pues en mi condición yo soy un campesino. Tuve la oportunidad a través de
I am a peasant,
múltiples esfuerzos.
but
Después de una larga
I've
tarea
had the
de
opportunity to
regresar de las
study
comunidades,
after much
después
effort
de
and a lot of
donde
work.
no hay posibilidades a universidades, porque
I come from a community
en los
where there's no
pueblos del
chance
Chocó
to study,
y en todo el Pacífico,
because
en
in
las
Choco
regiones
villages
ribereñas
on the
de los
Pacific
ríos no
along the
se
river,
encuentran
there's no university.
universidades, sino en los
You
centros
have to move to the
urbanos.
city.
Tuve la oportunidad de
I've had the
salir
opportunity
con
to
mucho
leave my
esfuerzo
parents
de mis padres
and learn law.
y estudiar derecho, y eso me motivó
That
a
pushed me
regresar
to
de
come
nuevo
back to my
a las
communities,
comunidades para
to
trabajar
work
con
for them,
ellas, con el
in order to
objetivo de
create,
también
in one way or
impulsar
another, a
de una
legal
u otra
process
manera un
to
proceso
obtain recognition
donde
of
seguir
their rights
prestando la oportunidad
as Colombian citizens and as an ethnic group.
Reconozcan sus derechos como ciudadano colombiano y también la parte cultural como grupo étnico que somos. Para que se tenga claro
To clarify,
qué es el área familiar,
legally there is a family
qué es el
domain,
área individual y
an
qué es el
individual
área
domain,
comunitaria. Porque
and
cada
a
uno va a
community
tener un
domain.
reglamento para
Each
su
is
para
covered
su
by a
uso,
legal clause.
goce y disposición. Dada esas
We found out that the
circunstancias, vimos que la
administrative
división
division of the
política
country
administrativa del país
would
nos
force us to
llevaba a
separate
hacernos
the Antioquia region
una
from the
separación
Choco.
en cuanto a lo que
We've
era
made the state
Antioquia y lo que es
understand
Chocó.
that
Nosotros
we're
le
not
dimos a
interested
entender
in the
al
political
Estado
and
que para
administrative
nosotros no
division
nos
of the country
interesa la división
because we
política
form one
administrativa del
ethnic
país,
group,
sino que somos unos grupos
that the division
étnicos
was
y
made
que esa
without our
división
agreement,
política administrativa del país
and that
fue
we could
hecha
not
sin el
be divided.
consentimiento nuestro, y que eso no nos podía separar.
We cannot deny
Nosotros no
that our
podemos
country is at
desconocer
war.
que
It's a cruel
prácticamente
war
nuestro país
that
está en
victimizes the most helpless.
Nuestro país prácticamente
If one
está en
looks at
guerra,
where
es una
actions of
guerra
armed groups
cruel,
take place,
que
those actions are
siempre
always aimed at the
va
less
con los más
protected
desprotegidos.
populations. They always attack the population that is the most vulnerable. They always attack the peasants.
De los violentos, de los alzados en armas, y siempre las acciones están dirigidas a los pueblos menos protegidos. Siempre vemos que se ataca la población más vulnerable, siempre vemos que se ataca el campo.
No más guerra ni destrucción en nuestra tierra, nuestros campos están desolados por la violencia. Mucha gente lisiada, niños con trauma, muchas viudas. ¿Qué pasa si todos somos hermanos? Queremos paz, vida, trabajo. Estamos cansados de andar como gitanos. Sí.
De la guerra.
This war waged by armed groups, the guerrillas, the paramilitaries, this war isn't against the government, but against the peasants.
No más guerra. Po, po, po. No más guerra. Po, po, po.
No más guerra.
Porque en estos momentos,
what's happening now is that they're forcing us off our lands using armed groups that have their own strategies. That way, whole villages are forced to leave their lands despite having collective property. It's no secret that landlords who see their zones converted to desert are reaching some parts of the Choco.
Porque para nadie es un secreto que el avance que se tiene en muchos terratenientes en estos momentos que ya ven sus zonas convertidas prácticamente en desiertos, están avanzando hacia esta parte del Chocó.
No más guerra en Bogotá, no más guerra en el Caguán, no más guerra en Urabá, no más guerra en todo el mundo, no más guerra en África, no más guerras.
Mucha gente no quiere.
Many people won't assume the status of refugee because they are in danger here in Quibdó too. Armed groups operate both in rural zones and in the city. Some people have been chased from the countryside up to here and then slaughtered. Thus, people deny. They refuse to be labeled as refugees. And the statistics don't count all refugees. For there are two types of expulsion by armed groups. There is also a selective expulsion.
Qué bello es el día de la Navidad. Toda la gente muy contenta está, pero hay un negrito allá en el rincón, con su pecho lleno de pena y dolor. Ay, ay, qué bello es el día de la Navidad. Pa' todos los niños nació el niño Dios, pero hay un negrito allá en el rincón, con su pecho lleno de pena y dolor.
Este es un Cristo negro, un hombre negro que viene amarrado, remembrando ese proceso histórico en que se llegó a América como esclavos traídos de África.
Que niño Dios anoche nos trajo como Navidad. Y le dice, mira lo que el niño Dios anoche nos trajo como Navidad. Y el negrito triste se pone a llorar. Y pa' consolarlo, uno echó a contar. Ay, yo sentí que anoche cuando el niño Dios levantó mi almohada para colocar el regalo mío, me besó en la frente y me dijo, mijito, que Dios te bendiga, con la voz igualita que habla mi mamá. Ay, con esa voz, con esa voz, igualitiquita que hablaba mi mamá. Y el negrito triste se pone a llorar. El negrito triste siente un gran dolor y viendo para cielo le pregunta a Dios. Y viendo para cielo le pregunta a Dios, ¿dónde está mi madre? ¿Dónde está, Señor?
Negro of Choco. His culture, his joyous folklore, sung and danced to the sound of clarinets and the leather of drums. From Mother Earth raped just like yesterday. Raise your flag for dignity, your right to do so. The people are tired of this long history. Crying equality, they relive the cry. Anxious genes of liberty shake in their veins and cry faith in a future of peace and equality. As the name tells you, the Ashanti group tries to reproduce in Cali the cultural traditions of the Ghana-based Akan spirituality. We Ashantis, here in Cali in Colombia, believe we must defend our territory and our people by defining ourselves as individuals, by educating people, by rebuilding our history, our Africanness.
Carlos se rasuró la calabaza, se alisó el pelo, Tomasa y disque para mejorar mi raza. Negros con indios, con blancos se casa. Oh yeah, qué barbaridad. Provengo de la cima del negro cimarrón. Yo soy descendientes de bencos viejos. Soy negro al 100%. Negro por fuera y negro por dentro.
No, o sea, realmente, o sea, el concepto
The basis Ashanti works from is one of Afro descendants. We don't feel Colombian in a country that takes no account of us. The country doesn't give a damn for blacks. To feel Colombian would mean to belong. The country doesn't want us. It means nothing to be Colombian.
Negro al 100%, negro por fuera y negro por dentro. Negro al 100%, de mi color no dudo ni un momento.
Bacano lo del baile, chévere lo del baile.
A dance is cool, but they're killing young people. Our community is hungry, and the people didn't see it. They were applauding us, but they were clapping for the dance. And we're seeing that that's not enough. That's why we decided to create this association to take care of problems in our community. That's why we've created the Cultural and Education Association Ashanti.
Oh, Padre Nostro, casi me desmayo al ver frente de mí su rostro, furioso como un toro, fuerte como un potro, colmillos afilados, o al perro rabioso, garra desgarrante, creo que es como un oso, es como un gato, parece un sapo, ruge como un león, grande como un dragón, aprieta como pitón, ágil como un halcón, cambia de color como si fuera un camaleón, cambia de color como si fuera un camaleón.
Come on for me, El monstruo de la Laguna Azul es el monstruo del barrio Charco Azul.
Some said it was a mother of water they brought. My mother told me mother water was something that rose up in water. They also rose up fantastic animals. According to my mother, when somebody passes the water, it makes waves with the wind and draws the person who sees into the water. That's what I've been told about the mother water.
Se levanta el agua como olas, entonces hace mucho viento y arroja a la persona hacia el mar o hacia el lago, el sitio este, ¿no? Eso es lo que me lograron contar a mí que era la madre agua.
El monstruo de la Laguna Azul es el monstruo del barrio Charco Azul. Hay un monstruo en la Laguna Azul. Es el monstruo del barrio Charco Azul.
5 centuries of Catholicism have transformed the black people of Guapi in the Cauca into Afro-descendants who have forgotten Africa. The members of the Torres family are an exception. The Torres family on the Pacific coast construct xylophones and bongos in the African tradition. They alone have handed down the secrets of the craft for 5 generations. The first instrument brought from Africa was the marimba of Chonta. It came to Colombia with my ancestors.
Llegó a Colombia por medio de mi bisabuelo, puedo decir.
My great-grandfather taught it to my grandfather, my grandfather to my father, and my father to his sons.
Pero que el aparato más grande y más eminente que hay en el mundo es la marimba en Chonta, porque produció de África.
The devil plays music, because hell does exist.
En el cielo existe, porque él aprendió, ¿no? Y él vino para enseñarle a los demás. El diablo, dicen, pues, ¿no?
It's there that he learned it,
El diablo es
and he came to teach it to mankind. Does the devil play marimba very well? Oh, he's the best player of the marimba, the guitar. He's the man who plays the best. The devil, when I saw him, was tall, strong, black man, and I shook as he looked at me. Jose Torres has taught his children and grandchildren to play. Gennaro, the eldest of his 9 kids, and Jose Gustavo Torres, the eldest of Gennaro's children, both play the marimba. I wear it here, the talisman. This little portrait, I wear it here. And in my house there is Christ and Holy Antonio and the Virgin of Carmen. I always have them in my compound, and they will follow me to the grave. I felt such a wave of emotion saying goodbye to Francisco Torres, standing there holding the picture of his father. This piece of Africa, so far away and yet so close.
Todo comenzó en el Coliseo. Mi grupo se dirigía con picha y sin dinero, rumbo a la caseta. Rapeábamos y hablábamos de las lindas guapireñas. Luego se acercaba un grupo de rateros, asesinos, periqueros, con muchos extranjeros. Hubo un disturbio, le sacamos un cuchillo. Luego dispararon a mi amigo, le pegaron. Entonces reaccionó la infantería de marina, ametrallando, secuestrando al frente de la policía. Lo secuestraron, 3 tiros le pegaron, lo secuestraron, 3 tiros le pegaron. Corrimos al hospital, no lo podía creer, pensando que mi amigo el brazo lo iba a perder. El brazo tú no lo pierdes, con mucha moral le dije, cálmate amigo, que esto es muy sencillo. Perdóname Señor por lo que estoy haciendo, confío en tus cosas y mi fe la estoy poniendo la venganza.
Pues eso se trata como en el país hay mucha violencia, o sea, para
We're singing this song because, as there's so much violence in the country, to make all that violence ravaging the country stop, there's too much violence. It's a small message we're sending to the guerrilla chiefs. We're committed to speaking with the guerrillas. We want peace.
Sea de iglesia o sea civil, somos limitados. La iglesia tenemos la ventaja de que tenemos un elemento importante que es la revelación.
In the church, we have the advantage of having a source called revelation, the gospel that enlightens the believers. We're in the middle of a very interesting work process, a period of Christian history that is the same throughout much of Latin America. We're discovering the work that the church has done to defend Indians and blacks from the master's mistreatment and civil force. Many have been persecuted and have suffered a lot. Talking about enculturation, I think our work is good. It's interesting. We've been working steadily for 20 years. Scores of research projects have been carried out, and we've reached a very interesting level, because before, black people didn't admit to being black, and today it's just the opposite. They're proud of being black and of their culture.
Aquí todo se paraliza, cuando se van las latas todo se paraliza
Here, everything shuts down during Holy Week, a time given over to meditation and to celebration. People come from the surroundings, from Cali. All the colonies come here. It's also the period when the greatest number of people come here. Guapireños, who are living in other regions, they come for the holy days. I thank you for making me black. This is a poem by Bernard Dadié, a francophone from the Ivory Coast. I thank thou for having made me black, for having made me the total sum of all pains. Put the world on my head. White is a color of circumstances. Black, the color of every day. And I bear the world from the first evening. 36 sparks transpierced my heart. 36 fires have burned my body, and my blood on all crosses has reddened the snow. And my body in all levants has reddened nature. I'm glad for the shape of my head, made to bear the world, satisfied with the shape of my nose, that must smell all the winds of the world. Happy with the shape of my legs, eager to run all steps of the world. I thank thou for having created me black.
Rugen las olas en las rocas milenarias. Se oyen murmullos de plegarias y dolor. Es de mi carne aquel dolor y de mi raza aquella voz. Cuando obligada por cadenas aquí esta tierra un día llegó. Tierra de América, la patria que ayer con su sudor ganó. Porque me pregunto por qué hoy se ve negro mi color. Si el algodón que yo sembré jamás tiznado germinó. Si el oro que al suelo arranqué más rutilante se tornó. ¿Por